Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a special episode of our podcast, The Venturis Stories. Besides being the first podcast for the new year, there are quite a few things that are different about today's episode. First of all, this is our first foray into video podcasting. So far, we have predominantly done audio podcasting. This is our foray into video podcasting. Second, this actually is intended to be a session for conference COMSNETS 2024, which is a premier conference that happens in India. And I happen to be part of the organizing committee, and we have a new new initiative that we have launched called Entrepreneur Ignite Summit. So this is actually a session for that we are also using as a podcast episode for Venturis Stories. Third, my usual co-host Arjun and my founding partner is not here. It's just me. However, I do expect my co-chair for Entrepreneur Ignite Summit, Somali, to join us as a co-host for this podcast. So with that, since this session is really focused on COMSNETS Entrepreneur Ignite Summit, we are actually delighted to have with us today my good friend Srujan Akula, who's the CEO of Modern Data Company, and really the focus is to learn from Srujan about his entrepreneurial journey, how he has gotten where he has gotten so far. And the idea is to share this as part of the Entrepreneur Ignite Summit with our audience there. So Srujan, welcome to the show. As I discussed, the focus is about sharing your learnings with other budding entrepreneurs at this Entrepreneur Ignite Summit. So maybe let's get started with a brief introduction and any high and low specifically related to your journey with Modern Data Company that you would like to share with the audience.
Sure, and thanks for having me, Gaurav. Really nice to be here on the podcast with you. I'm glad my face was the first one you wanted for the
video. Well, say something about your face.
So, I'm Srujan Akula. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Modern Data Company. We are headquartered in Palo Alto, California. And we also have our engineering offices in Hyderabad and Indore in India. As a company, the Modern Data Company, we've developed a platform called Data OS. We call it the world's first operating system for data. And the reason we built an operating system for data is to start bringing product thinking to data so that we simplify how data gets to be used by business teams, provide implicit trust in data so that the business teams can start making decisions very, very quickly without going through the whole rigmarole of data engineering, data analysts to just get an insight for you. So that's sort of what we're trying to do, is really shift the data mindset to stop thinking about tables, columns, source systems, and start thinking about it from the outcome perspective. And that's what we've been doing for the last 5 years. Your question about the highs and lows, literally that happens every day at this stage of the company. So, but overall, I think the highs for me have been seeing our product deployed in customer environments, seeing the kind of impact it is delivering to the customers and how they're able to get whatever they need to get done, whether it's a healthcare company, whether it's a distribution company, whether it's a financial institution. And frankly, that is what gives me the high, is seeing the product actually solving real world problems at scale. And the lows, as any CEO would vouch for, there are 1,000 things that come to you. And being the CEO of a startup, it almost feels like you're here to make the worst decisions every day and deal with the worst problems in the company. So that's an ongoing process. And as a tech startup founder, I think that's something that I've embraced from the beginning, that is what we have to deal with and to get to where we need to go. So
that's fascinating. Yeah. That's actually fascinating, and I'm sure for the budding entrepreneurs as part of this summit, that's a useful lesson, that it's not all rosy. There's the entrepreneur journey is not for the faint-hearted, but
yes,
as you said, seeing real outcomes and real customer problems being solved based on what you've done is very rewarding as well. So there's a lot of pros. and
Yeah.
everybody should feel encouraged about that. And your point about product thinking, I am a deep product thinker, really fascinates. I will come back to that. However, will switch gears a bit, and since we are talking about entrepreneurs, and one of the first thing in an entrepreneurial journey is usually about funding. I know at the stage that you are at right now, you've actually been at it for some time. You've raised
Mhm.
seed funding, pre-seed funding, and now you're looking to raise Series A funding. So what is your view or your advice to the budding entrepreneurs out there about how to go about the fundraising journey and any tips for the
Mhm.
fundraising strategy?
I think it starts with, you having a product that is exceptionally good. That, when you go have these conversations, that creates sort of an impact, and the investor on the other side sees this as something that potentially could be a large opportunity for them, right?
Mhm.
So it has to start with product. And as a founding CEO, you need to have the conviction and be honest with yourself on where you see that product going in the current market conditions over the next few years as the macroeconomic conditions they keep changing. Where does your product fit and how is it going to evolve with the market? I think that's,
Mhm.
frankly, it starts with product more than anything else. Coming to the nitty-gritties of the fundraising process, I mean, I'm a little bit more conservative than other CEOs. I want to raise money when I know how am I going to use the funds. I don't want to
Mhm.
just raise money. And one thing I tell my team all the time, raising funds is not an accomplishment, right? Getting revenue goals, customer satisfaction, those are the things you should be looking for. This is just a
Mhm.
means to an end. And that is how I treat fundraising. So I look for what funding I need, and when I know how I'm going to deploy the funds is when I'm more aggressive and getting the funds that I need. Of course, in the current market conditions, we have to balance it out because the there's an ebb and flow to the VC fundraising overall environment. So maybe in this market, raising a little bit more is probably going to be helpful.
Mhm.
But traditionally, that's kind of how I think. The other thing is, when you're raising money, put yourself in the investor's shoes. Understand what is it that they are trying to make a decision off of when they're talking to you. And from what
Mhm.
I have seen with the conversations I've had, they're literally in that 45 minutes trying to de-risk a few things from their side. Can I de-risk the product? Is this a product that I can bet on that has a massive opportunity? Can I
Mhm.
de-risk the technology? How is the technology? How did they think through the architecture, etc.? Can I de-risk the team? Can I de-risk their GTM execution? So if you think that way on what are the risks that they see in investing, and how are you presenting your story to de-risk those
Mhm.
potential minefields, or potential risks that the investor might see. So it's more empathy towards why they're having a conversation, what are they trying to get out of it, and make sure you address that rather than just talking about your product and yourself. I think that's
Yeah.
sort of what I've learned over the process.
Yeah, that's actually great because that kind of draws a parallel for me in terms of just any product journey or product thinking. You try to place the customer or the user perspective and come in from there. So in a
Yeah,
way, even for fundraising, you follow that mindset that start with the investors' pain points or what do they care about and try to appeal to them. That makes a lot of
absolutely.
sense.
I think
Yeah.
that empathy is needed across the board, Gaurav. Like, in fact, our core values include humility, empathy, accountability, transparency, empathy for customer, empathy towards each other, towards investor. I
Mhm.
think that has to be fundamental, especially as a
Yep.
founder. If you need to lead a team and motivate them, I think that is an essential trait, I feel.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, so sort of this brings me back to the product thinking part that you had started off with in terms of the
Hmm.
core product. So I love your message about being the first real core data platform. And I know Gartner has classified you as a data integration platform, but your vision is much broader than that. So, and so this concept of product thinking, of course, has been applied in the field of networking infrastructure and other products where we've come from. It is relatively new when it comes to data space. And so what's your take on this and how are you going about it at Modern Data Company?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been a product manager, most of
Mhm.
my career, right? So I've never started building technology and then in the process figure out what product to build because I'm building some cool technology, right? That never works. It's never efficient. You can't start off solving an unknown problem. Then you won't solve anything,
Yep.
right? So unfortunately with data, there's been this mindset that let's just centralize everything into a warehouse, into a data lake, into a lake house, whatever that format is, and then figure out what use cases you want to deliver. And then let's figure out, once the data is centralized, what do I need to do to support my business use cases? We believe that is a very inefficient way of thinking about it. If you have clarity, if you have a structure to understand what is it that the business wants to do. If I'm trying to create, let's say, a customer 360, to map out my customer journey, why am I doing that? Am I doing that to improve my marketing efficiencies? Am I using that to improve the value of my sales inventory? Am I using this for, reporting, financial reporting, around my customer stats? These are very different ways that the data needs to be prepared, very different quality, very different compliance requirements, for the same data in how it gets used. So product thinking allows you to or enables you to capture what is the intent, not just what data I want.
Yep.
How do I want to use it? Who is going to use this? Is this a first party or a third party using this? What sort of countries am I going to deploy this in? What are the local regulatory compliance needs, when it comes to leveraging and using the data? These are the things that we capture upfront. Once you capture that and then have a very clear understanding of your existing infrastructure, it becomes a lot more efficient to not just move massive amounts of data, but then build purposeful pipelines that are essentially delivering data for that specific outcome. So that's the fundamental difference in how we think about data. Is start with outcomes, provide a very crisp construct to codify the outcome. It almost becomes like your data product PRD in a way, to say this is exactly what I'm trying to do. And once you have clarity on the PRD, then it's a matter of executing it efficiently. And our OS provides all the tools to execute against that outcome. So that's sort of how we are thinking about it differently. And that foundational construct of how to capture the outcome is a concept of a data product, which you're probably hearing a lot about. And Gartner recently said this is a transformative category, potentially in the next 3 to 5 years. And the whole point is that is going to simplify data significantly. So the business never has to worry about Snowflake, Databricks, tables, and columns. They think about an orders product, an inventory product, a demand forecasting product, and use that to drive what they need to do. So that's the fundamental shift we are trying to bring to data.
Yeah, and that sounds like a category creation moment in this data cycle. So that's all the best to you. Now, related to that, there's a lot of hype around data. So and there are a lot of established companies, newer deep tech startups like yourself. And I see Somali has joined us as well now. So Somali, I'm asking your question right now, but
serves me right for not joining
so,
on time. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
It's okay. Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Anyway, going back to the question is around how do you go about attracting prospective talent in this highly competitive space, whether it is deep tech startups or others that you're competing with?
Yeah, I think number one, as a CEO, I think one of my job, the top 3 things is talent acquisition. Besides fundraising and setting the product vision, you have to be a guy who has the capacity to go convince somebody on your vision, on the power of what you're trying to do, the impact this could have, to get people to join. Especially folks who are joining startups, they're not looking for that 8 to 5 job, right? They are trying to do things that could be highly disruptive. They want to add a lot of impact, and they want that satisfaction of creating something meaningful. So those are the kind of people that usually I've seen get attracted to startups, especially at this stage. So for them, yes, the monetary aspects, those are important. But more important than that is, the clarity that you have, that I have in my vision, the conviction I have in the vision and the why behind it, and then being able to articulate that and get the other person excited. Right. And again, it goes back to the empathy that I was talking about earlier. Empathize with what is it that the other person wants to get out of a role, right? And can you provide the right environment, or can you convince them of, this is the right environment for them to accomplish what they want to. For some people, it is a jump in a title. Some people, it is, I really want to build something meaningful. I want to be associated with this trend. There could be many different reasons why, people join, right? And understanding that and being able to articulate. But it starts with having a very clear, crisp vision for what you're trying to do and
So,
the why
Srujan,
behind it.
for this, can you give some
Yeah.
concrete examples where maybe you stole, stole is not a great word, not a very positive word, but maybe got someone from a tech giant and got him or her to join your company. So maybe the next level of detail of how maybe either through equity, like think of the more monetary side, or think of the more career driven side, where you can kind of entice this new guy or girl
Yeah.
to your company.
Yeah. So luckily, I've been lucky enough to hire like a very strong team. I've had, former VCs, who I was talking to earlier, joined us to work with us full time. A former CIO of a Fortune 50 company joined, our company as we were going through this. And it really, frankly, for me, it wasn't really about the monetary aspects because those were easy to deal with. The harder part was, are we aligned on the vision? Do they see the data space the same way that we are seeing this here? Do they believe that if we accomplish this, this could be massively disruptive for the whole industry? I think that is where I was able to convince them, and it also comes from you being honest to yourself and to them about this is why we are doing this, and that honesty goes a long way. So, frankly, I think that is what has helped me attract, and I've gotten people who've had C-level titles in companies that just went IPO that decided to join this, and the reason, if you ask them, is we believe in this vision, and we believe if we execute this right, this is going to be massively disruptive. I think if that happens, the monetary aspects, frankly, I never spend more than maybe 15, 20 minutes discussing this with a potential hire because most of the convincing happens on the other things I just spoke about.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer of starting with the why and aligning on the core why, as Simon Sinek says. So, what you were saying, lay out a very compelling vision where you are appeal to the person's why, then the rest of the things are, of course, important, but they are kind of the security, safety rungs in the classic Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You appeal to the higher purpose. And then
at this stage, you have to. Otherwise, I can't get somebody from a Google or a Meta to join me at this stage unless they see that bigger thing. Because money, it's a commodity. They can get that money in 1,000 different places.
So without infringing into your IP, without infringing into your IP or core assets, like I have a little startup. Gaurav has a bigger startup. So can you talk about how you kind of very passionately express your vision? Like, can you give us some glimpse of, that next level of detail that, this is what we're doing. This is what we have set out to do. So maybe this is also a way to advertise your company. But would you be comfortable giving us, maybe you're trying to attract me or Gaurav, right?
Yeah, so we've had this. I mean, I just spoke to Gaurav about the vision behind the product, but it's kind of I'll summarize that for you again. Fundamentally, in the data space today, there is a lot of risk and cost in taking the raw data that your enterprise generates from an operational perspective and converting that into insights that are driving your business and the business value. And the current approach of centralizing everything into a lake house, a warehouse, a data lake, whatnot, and then figuring out how to take that centralized data and deliver on the business outcomes is the traditional way of thinking. We believe, because you're constantly writing a lot of ETLs, you're constantly having to manage the risk of moving data, is this encrypted properly? And every time you move, every time you make a copy, your risk surface is increasing exponentially. So, and it's a lot of cost, which is where we saw a lot of companies spending tens, in some cases, hundreds of millions of dollars in their data infrastructure investments, but don't see the value because most of the money goes in this preparation of data versus using it. We want to shift that completely on its head, this narrative. Start with giving a business team a construct to define what they want to do. from a business decision perspective? Am I trying to improve my demand forecasting? Am I trying to figure out which accounts should I be hunting and farming? Am I trying to figure out, how can I reduce the time for the patient from door to dock? Right? These are the problems that they want to solve. And if you give them a construct to encapsulate what is it that I'm trying to solve, with what sort of compliance, what sort of quality requirements are necessary for this data, then take the understanding you have of your existing infrastructure at the metadata layer. And once you have that thorough understanding, it becomes very easy for you to say, okay, I have 1,000 different places where this data exists, but this is the highest quality. This is the one that is being used the most to make other business decisions. So I can trust this with this level of objectivity and then use that data towards the outcome. Right? And this is what our platform does, is gives you a construct to define the outcome and then gives you all the technology necessary to give the data from the existing infrastructure into that outcome. If that helps, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fascinating explanation and fascinating journey so far. So, Srujan, what do you see as next for Modern Data Company, given where you are at now, and given you are in the midst of raising Series A with a very compelling vision? And is there any other piece of advice that you would like to share with our audience of the budding entrepreneurs here at Entrepreneur Ignite Summit?
Yeah, so two questions, right? First, where do we see? I believe this category of data products, this whole applying product thinking to data is going to be the future. I strongly believe the foundational quanta of data is going to shift from a table to a product, a data product versus a table. And that is what we believe is going to be the future of data. That is what is going to commoditize the infrastructure. And unless the complexity gets commoditized in any other industry, you don't see that exponential adoption across the laggards and the mass market. And I feel data is at that inflection point over the next 3 to 5 years. If we can start commoditizing the infrastructure and start investing more into these data products and the outcome-based ways of thinking of data, is where I see the market going. And I believe we are very well placed. We just got added to the Magic Quadrant, as an honorable mention in this category. There's a lot of other companies that are also trying to execute against this vision. And we've been at it for the last 5 years. This is what my co-founder Animation, I started the company with that vision, is we thought the market has to move in this direction 5 years ago. And we started building against that, right? So we are excited about 2024 and the next 3 years to start riding that market trend of the data product adoption and start becoming a category leader in that. At least that's my short-term goal. The longer-term goals, but I want to first get to our step one before I talk about the other things. For the budding entrepreneurs, I'd say the biggest thing is be honest with yourself. If you really believe, is that product where it needs to be for you to, go convince somebody to raise the money, or for you to spend like a very valuable time of yours for the next 3 to 5 years on something, right? You need to really believe in it yourself, right? Number one. And then be persistent. Besides like the product and other things we spoke about, Gaurav, persistence is important. There's going to be the highs and lows are going to be every day. And don't lose sight of the broader vision, and have the courage to and the conviction to chase that vision. And if you do this, with the right mindset, I think you will be successful. It's just you have to be persistent. That's the one thing I learned, at least over the last 5 years.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. So Somali, I over to you to close it off with some final questions, thoughts.
Yeah, so thank you, Srujan, for joining us for this special discussion as a part of the Entrepreneur Ignite Summit. I'm very excited that we could make this happen. And you sound like you're very passionate about your data products, and that is exactly what we want to convey to our budding entrepreneurs. So one final question before we close this episode. One is, what attributes or accomplishments significantly enhance a deep tech startup's appeal to investors? So that is from the attracting investors standpoint. And the second is, how impactful is having a minimum viable product or early traction, or having these early customers important in securing such investments? So the first one is, what attributes are significantly important to appeal to investors, and second is how important is having that minimum viable product or the early traction important in that process?
Yeah, I think to the first question, for me, the key gauge for that is how happy are your early customers? Is this a product that they cannot live without? Even if it's 3 customers, even if it's 5 customers, if an investor talks to the customer, is that person going to say, I can't imagine a life without this product? This has helped me so much, right? I think that is what is, I think, the biggest indicator for you. If it's a product that you're able to sell, but it doesn't become like a necessity, for that function, it could be a small workflow, it could be a much broader thing. But I think that for me is the best indicator. Is the customer going to be pissed if you take this product away from them, especially these early customers? And if you are able to show that, I think then it's a matter of your execution discipline and taking that and building a business around it. On the other side, on the minimum viable product, I feel that whole concept of a MVP and the product market fit, people interpret it so many different ways, and we oftentimes, I feel, it's becoming a detriment, at least from my perspective. If you don't define, what exactly is an MVP properly, right, and just chase an MVP. So I've encouraged our team to look at a minimum sellable product, MSP. It's not about minimum viable product. What can you sell? End of the day, you're here to run a business and make money. So what is it that is your minimum sellable product is the gauge that I look at, not what is the minimum viable, right? So that's the shift. And Sequoia has a great article on this, and that's where I learned this from, talking about this minimum sellable product and how do you figure that out and how do you go about leveraging that in your sales cycle. Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
So one final related question. One related question is, how much did you have to refine that MVP or MSP? Like when did you say this is ready? Let's get out and get our first customer. How was that process like? How did you refine that process?
I mean, for the first customer, generally, it comes through relationships, that the founders have where you get those first few customers. So if you're convincing them about your technology and a potential way to solve the problem, and you don't make a licensing or cost a constraint, for the first few customers, I just wanted to show them that this works. Give me an opportunity to show the value. Let's not even talk money. I only will talk money if you saw the value in what I promised. And I'm very confident in delivering that in this time frame. And that's what we did to get the first few customers, right? So that was, the best way to, go about it. And frankly, that whole thing about do I have something is never going to be the case. There's always something new that comes in. A customer is going to ask something. So that is an ever evolving process. But, as a founder, put a gate and say, okay, now I have enough and let me build a business around this, version of the product. It's something that you learn as you have conversations. I don't think there is like a one rule for it. I think you'll learn when the customers, when the prospects get excited, or what I said earlier, if the early customers feel like they can't live without this, I think that gives you the best indicator.
So thanks, Srujan, again for joining us. This has been a wonderful session. We'll play the Entrepreneur Ignite Summit tomorrow and look forward to continuing the discussion. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys, and good luck with your conference tomorrow. Thank you so much.